If you woke up in a fantasy world, you'd probably expect to be the guy with the glowing sword, legendary powers, and a crowd of admirers. But our protagonist, he got the short end of the stick, much like those of us who feel like we're stuck in the background of our own lives. He's just a minor noble in a world that feels like a half-broken game. According to the original script, he's destined to be a corpse before the first arc even ends. But instead of cursing the gods and accepting the fate like we do, he uses the ultimate cheat code, which is the actual common sense and a spoiler-filled brain. He's doing whatever it takes to rewrite the script, but will it be enough to change his destiny, or is he just delaying the inevitable? Let's delve into the story and see if common sense can actually beat a death sentence. This story had begun in the middle of a busy market where everyone was shouting and feeling happy after seeing that the hero of their country had returned from the battle. But the main protagonist of this story, the hero's friend whose name was Werner, was getting frustrated as he wondered why people were getting so excited, and he also felt angry at his friend Muzzle. Seeing this, Muzzle just winked back, and the people thought that he was winking at them, so they became even more happy and kept shouting while running here and there. Seeing this, Werner grew more tense and quietly ran away from that place. In the next scene, it showed that in the same market area, when Werner was sitting alone somewhere, Mazel came there and said sorry to him, and they both jokingly called themselves the Hero and the Great Viscount. Actually, it was a small hotel where Werner was waiting for Mazel, and he had already ordered the food they usually ate. After that, they both spent time together by drinking alcohol and talking with each other for a long time. Actually, the hero Mazel was Werner's best friend, but in the beginning, Werner did not want to stay in touch with him, though his life did not go the way he wanted. He thought that living in the present world was the perfect example of this because he had once been a normal Japanese person, but suddenly he got reincarnated into a medieval European world, which was basically like rebirth, and he found himself in none other than the world of a video game he had once played. It was a game of a classic RPG where the hero defeated the Demon Lord and saved the world, and it all felt fun until the second half of the game began, when the Demon Lord's minions started invading the capital and burning it down completely. That was the place where the hero later got crowned as the king. But the problem was that the main protagonist, Werner, was only a side character who did not have much role in the game. Because of that, he died in the game without doing anything important. Due to this fear of dying, Werner started practicing and slowly improving his combat skills so he could protect himself in the future. Gradually, with this effort, he got enrolled in the capital's academy. In the shift to the academy, a boy came up to him and started asking some questions while talking about how Werner was at the top of the class and was known as a very honorable student. But Werner believed that he was nothing special or noble at all. In truth, he felt that he was just a hard-working person trying desperately to save his own life. He was also good in his studies because of the knowledge from his previous life. That boy also said that some girls even looked at Werner with interest in their eyes. But Werner believed that the only truly famous person in the whole school was none other than Mazel. He thought that Muzzle was the main person of the campus, and he felt frustrated about being in the same grade as him. For Werner, this only increased his stress because it confirmed that the world was moving toward the same path as the game's beginning, where the hero had to save everyone from the demon attack. He also tried to avoid getting close to Mazel as much as possible, but his life did not go the way he wanted. On that same day, a girl named Degenkolb came to him and asked if he wanted to eat some sweets that she had brought from her country. Seeing her, Werner remembered that she was a student from the neighboring country of Salzanach and also the daughter of a duke. It was not just a simple meeting, but actually a tea party that regularly took place in the campus cafeteria as a kind of matchmaking event. But before that, Werner noticed her drinking a strange kind of potion, and this made him curious about what was really going on. He started thinking of different situations, like what if she was putting something in the sweets to make Mazel fall for her or to make him unconscious? At first, Werner thought that he should stay away from it because since Mazel was a hero, he would not fall for such cheap tricks. But to his shock, Werner was really surprised to see that Mazel actually fell into that trap, and the bodyguards were also not there. So there was no guarantee for everyone's safety in the end of the game if the hero got taken down in the beginning. Because of this, Werner decided to somehow protect Mazel. He quickly ran towards him and started helping him, seeing which the other girls also became frustrated. He said that he would take Mazel to the hospital, but Degenkolb said that she would take him to the doctor since he got into that condition because of the sweets from her country. As she kept insisting on taking care of Mazel, Werner said that he would not tell anyone whether it happened because of her sweets or not. He also added that it was better for Mazel to stay at the school for now. Hearing this, all the girls became tense, and Degenkolb looked at him with anger. Seeing this, Werner felt a little scared, but no matter what, he had to protect the hero of the game. At that moment, Werner realized that it was actually a kidnapping attempt by the girl. The scene then shifted to the infirmary, where Werner was shouting at Mazel's bodyguards, asking how they could leave him so vulnerable. The guards gave excuses, saying that the Duke's daughter was there and it was a party, so they thought it was not right for them to interfere. Hearing all that, Werner felt frustrated that even after knowing the risk, they still left Mazel alone. So he told one guard to go and report this to a teacher and the other to keep an eye on the Duke's daughter, Degenkolb. When the guards tried to mumble about it, Werner got angry and asked if he was stuttering. Seeing this, both guards got scared, said yes, and quickly left from there. Werner then started thinking about Mazel, wondering if this hero would really be ready for the battles ahead, because if he got targeted again like this, it would be easy to ruin his future journey. Just as Werner was thinking about what he should do next, Mazel woke up and asked where he was. Werner said that he had been given poison, but an antidote was also given, so he was fine for now. Mazel felt surprised and asked how he could have been poisoned, and Werner replied that it was from the sweets the young lady had given him. Remembering this, Mazel got scared about the girl, as he had also eaten the sweets. But Werner clarified that the girl had already taken an antidote before coming to the party. Mazel felt completely surprised. At that moment, Werner explained what could have happened if Mazel had been taken away by her. In the worst case, Mazel could have been sent to Salzanach that very day, since aristocrats had no problem doing such things. Hearing all this, Mazel smiled and started laughing a little, which confused Werner. Mazel said that he was laughing because even though Werner was an aristocrat, he was saying such things. Werner was surprised to know that Mazel already knew about him, and he felt even more surprised when Mazel said that he had always wanted to talk to him but never got the chance. As they both started talking more freely like friends, suddenly some people entered the room and said that they needed to use it for some time, so they should leave. Werner calmly replied that a student was resting, so they needed to stay quiet. But those men got angry and questioned how Werner could say that. Werner quickly realized that they were not students of the school, so they must have been hired by someone to check if the task was completed. One of them came close and grabbed Werner's collar, but Werner understood that it was his duty to protect Mazel, so he kicked the man and then struck him with a rod. Werner wanted to protect Mazel, but he also knew that many people there were stronger than him. He thought it would be better if he attacked first, but suddenly, Mazel also started fighting them. In just a few seconds, Mazel knocked all of them down into a pile, even though he had been poisoned not long ago. Werner felt completely amazed to see the incredible power Mazel had, and he realized that heroes were truly impressive. They both talked for a while after that, and Werner felt relieved because he thought things might get dangerous, but because of Mazel, he was safe. He also felt that once the teacher arrived and he handed Mazel over safely, he would feel even more relaxed. Soon, the teacher came and asked Werner what had happened. Werner pointed toward those men and said that they did not seem to be from their school. Hearing this, the teacher got shocked, as it meant that someone had sent those men to attack Werner and Mazel. Werner calmly asked the teacher to take care of everything from there. After that, Werner decided to leave, trusting the teachers to handle the situation. Later, it was shown that the hero's bodyguards took the blame for the incident and were removed from their positions. After that, Werner was offered to take their place, but he refused because it would only make Mazel more attached to him. And that is exactly what happened, as Mazel slowly started getting closer to him. Since Werner had no other choice, he decided to accept it and quietly deal with whatever Mazel said or asked, because he wanted to make sure that the game continued, as it should. Before Werner even realized it, he and Mazel became very close friends and enjoyed their school life in their own simple way. After that, the real events of the game began, and the demon attack started, but after many tough battles, Werner and Mazel managed to fight back. At one moment, Werner said that if saving the world meant losing Mazel, then he would choose to change the world itself. And so, it became the legend of a hero that would be told for many years, along with the story of his best friend. So then the story showed what actually happened. One day, they suddenly got to know from their teacher that a demon stampede was going to happen, which was a huge attack of demons that came every 20 years, so their school had to give support to stop it. At that time, Werner felt a little nervous, thinking about what would happen next while the teacher was telling every student how they would handle it quickly. Werner was tense because he knew that this was the opening scene of the game, where the demon lord returned and his power and numbers were far greater than anyone expected. It would soon turn into a bloodbath in the capital. In the end, Mazel would have to protect the students while fighting. As Werner was thinking about all the past events of the game, he got disturbed when Mazel shouted and asked what he was doing, since he was not moving while the teacher was explaining. Without saying much, Werner suddenly said that he was going home. Mazel, confused, asked why, and Werner replied that he had to make many preparations for the battle. Hearing this, Mazel felt surprised and asked why Werner was taking it so seriously. Werner answered that things might turn out differently in the future. Mazel smiled and said that he would go with him, but Werner refused and asked him not to follow since their family ranks were different and they would be placed in separate groups. Hearing this, Mazel felt a little sad, but Werner tried to encourage him. After that, Werner suddenly became serious and told Maisel to carry as many potions, armor, and supplies as he could. Maisel smiled and agreed, jokingly calling Werner his mom. While they were talking, another student came between them and asked what he should do, as he had never fought a demon before. Hearing this, Maisel started telling him about his strengths and what role he could take in the future. Soon, other students also gathered around, and Maisel began guiding all of them. Seeing this, Werner felt surprised that Maisel could remember everyone's skills so clearly. In that world, everyone had a skill system like in a video game, where Werner had spearmanship, while Maisel had a skill called heroism. Heroism allowed someone to master any combat style easily, so Maisel could copy and use any skill just by watching, which felt like a cheat ability to Werner. Werner knew that Maisel would survive without much trouble, so he decided to focus on how he could survive on his own. After that, he said goodbye and walked away. As he looked back at Maisel, he kept thinking about what he should do next. The scene then shifted to Werner's house, where his butler Norbert informed him that his father would be with the king. Hearing this, Werner realized that his chances of survival had dropped even more. Now he also had to take the role of leading the Count's troops. Feeling tense, Werner asked how a student like him could take such a responsibility. On this, Norbert said that Commander Max Lyman would lead everything, so Werner's family only had to take part for formality. Werner asked Norbert to call Max and also arrange some shopping and hired soldiers. In truth, Werner wanted to go all in if he wanted to survive, nothing less than that. It then showed that Commander Max Lyman and a few sub-commanders were leading the army, which had about 42-foot soldiers, around 200 mercenaries, and nearly 100 students for support, which seemed too much for a demon stampede. Even Max Lyman felt that they might be overreacting. Werner also knew this, but to stay safe, he went beyond normal limits, as his family usually joined with only 4 or 5 people, but now he had gathered nearly 100 men, which looked like too much, yet Werner knew the danger was far greater, so he had to do it. One sub-commander, Organ, said that this might be a boring first battle for Werner. In truth, the top leaders of the battle were the Crown Prince and the royal grandson, who were both next in line for the throne and were supposed to die in this battle in the game. That was why Werner wanted to make sure that neither of them got defeated in this demon stampede. Just then, Lyman came to Werner and said that he should go and greet Count first while he still had the chance. In fact, Werner's family belonged to civil service, while the first family was more focused on military power. Since their lands were next to each other but their sources of income were different, their relationship was not very good. Still, Werner had to meet them. So Werner went ahead and met Count Timo. Both Werner and Lyman met Timo, and they had a short talk together. But Werner started feeling a little annoyed because Timo was talking more with Lyman than with him. It was because warriors often looked down on civil servants, so it was not fully Timo's fault. In Timo's eyes, Max was the battle commander, so he trusted and focused on him more. The son of the first family, Tyrone, then came there and asked Werner why he did not let his father command his forces as well. Both Werner and Lyman felt frustrated hearing this because Tyrone was clearly suggesting that they were not ready for such a big battle. Still, Werner had to stay calm, even though he felt uneasy about the clear difference in how they were treated. Suddenly, Tyrone's sister Hermine came and said that it was not possible. Even then, she mentioned that Werner was still a student, so she believed it would be better for him to stay behind their forces. Werner simply thanked them for their concern. Timo again told Werner not to overdo anything. After that, Werner somehow said goodbye as he was tired and just wanted to leave. After Werner and Lyman left, Hermine and Tyrone started talking about him, saying that Werner was a well-known student and the only one in his family who could handle military matters. Still, it seemed that his spearmanship was not very strong. Then, Tyrone casually wondered what would happen if Werner got killed in the battle and who would take over his family lands. Hearing this, even Hermine and Timo became tense at what Tyrone was thinking. The scene then shifted to the Zerfeld military camp, where the battalion grew tense on seeing the tired faces of Werner and Lyman, as they felt that something must have gone wrong during their meeting with Count Timo. Then the second platoon commander, Barky, and Organ started talking with each other about how the troops they had gathered the previous day were so disciplined. On the other side, Werner was thinking about the chain of command for the battle, where 5 men formed a squad with 1 acting as the leader. Since they had a total of 18 squads, they would be divided into 3 platoons. If every commander performed well, they could handle the stampede without much trouble. Werner then started giving instructions to everyone, but the soldiers did not seem interested and started getting bored. Werner then said that he knew it was just a demon stampede, but he did not want any unnecessary losses. That was why he wanted everything to be planned properly this time. Deep down, Werner knew that the battle against the demon forces would continue for a long time until the hero Maisel defeated the boss. But before all that, Werner first had to make sure that he survived. The scene then shifted to Maisel, who was with his squad and other people, where he had brought many recovery potions, which surprised everyone. Maisel had done this because Werner had told him to, as he knew that Werner often said unusual things for some reason. Even so, Maisel felt confused about what Werner was planning this time. Other side, Werner telling his whole battalion how they should fight each demon, saying they should stay in groups of 5 and never fight alone, and after finishing one, they should help other teams and then repeat the same plan. Hearing all this, the Barky and Organ were not happy, but Werner told them that this was not the time to show off their bravery. Everyone agreed, but they still looked clearly dissatisfied. Werner was not too worried about it, as he knew that in this world people valued individual strength, so working in groups felt difficult for them, but things would not work that way, so they had to cooperate. Werner also told them that there was no need to try to outshine any royal grandson or anyone else. Everyone somehow agreed, but they still did not look happy. Werner then explained that even if the demons seemed weak, a stampede meant large numbers, and that itself would become a problem. Barky agreed with this, saying that the sheer numbers would slowly drain their stamina. So, to reduce losses and still get good results, Werner's plan was the better choice. Werner then said that they should save as much energy as they could because in the worst case, they might have to support other families. Hearing this, everyone got confused about what kind of support and why it was needed. Then Organ stepped forward and asked Werner to send him to the platoon of Count Timo's household. Barky said that Organ only wanted to go because he had his eyes on Timo's daughter, Hermine. Hearing all this, Werner realized that they were taking the demon stampede too lightly, so he ordered that Barky would go to help Count Timo's side. After that, he told everyone to take their positions as the battle was about to begin. Soon the fight started after they confirmed their plan, and a few hours later the knights were struggling a lot, while the units that stood out were quickly crushed, and the number of dead kept rising, as the demons were easily killing them. But even in this chaos, Werner's forces were working together very well and were the only group with very few losses. During the fight, Werner kept giving orders, telling everyone what to do and asking them to move the wounded away from the front lines. Because of his hard training, Werner was also able to fight continuously without getting too tired. He kept reminding everyone not to go too far ahead and to stay alert. By following the plan, they managed to keep fighting the demons, and Werner kept hoping that they could hold on until Mazel defeated the boss. Soon, Werner started hearing more people shouting for help. He began thinking about what he should do, as the royal elite knights were on the right side and Count Timo's military family was on the left, and both sides were placed in a way that kept them protected by the main forces, but if either side collapsed, then everyone would have to fight just to survive. Werner knew he could send support to the first family, but since they were proud as a military house, they might refuse help if it was sent too early. Just then, Lyman came and said that other noble families were getting pushed back by the demons and their forces were being surrounded. He also said that the families who had joined them were now trying to regroup together. At that moment, Werner noticed someone struggling, so he rushed to help. When he looked closely, he realized that the person belonged to Count First's unit. After understanding the condition of Count Timo's forces, Werner asked his men to treat the injured soldier and started thinking again about sending support. Soon, he realized that this was not the time to hesitate, because if he delayed, the overall strength of their side would fall quickly. So he shouted and ordered Barky to move toward Count First's unit and support them. The scene then shifted to the right side of Count First's forces, where Timo was fighting the weaker demons and wondering what kind of stampede this was, as the demons were behaving strangely and his soldiers were getting scared more easily. He also got separated from Tyrone and Hermine. After hearing that they were on different lines, he shouted that they all needed to regroup. Hearing his voice, Hermine felt confused about why he was saying that, but she decided to follow his order. She shouted to her brother to move with her, but he did not respond. Soon, she got into a fight while trying to save someone, and after rescuing that person, she got stuck in a position where she could not escape and had to keep fighting, telling everyone behind her to stay back. The sub-commanders were hesitant to agree, but she shouted and ordered them to follow while wondering what was really happening. What she wanted to understand was why the demons kept coming again and again. She knew that if they did not keep moving, the battlefield would become their grave, so she had to reduce the enemy's numbers and then return to her father. Suddenly, while fighting the monsters, she was about to be attacked from behind, but Barky arrived and told her not to push herself too hard, then started taking down the demons. Hermine was surprised and wondered who they were and whether they were reinforcements, and if so, from which unit they came. She thanked Barky and asked where he came from. Barky smiled and said that he came from Zerfeld's unit and was sent to help under Werner's orders. Hermine was completely surprised on hearing Werner's name, but she also could not ignore the fact that while her family's forces were struggling, Werner's unit had somehow gained an advantage. So she asked Barky again if all of this was planned by the Zerfeld family's son. Barky replied yes, saying it was all Lord Werner's command. He then asked Hermine to let her forces pull back for now and to advise her father to take advantage of the situation. Hermione knew that her father and brother would not easily agree, as they might see it as a loss of pride, but she also understood that this was their chance to turn the battle in their favor. So she agreed and said that she would speak to her father immediately. The scene then shifted back to Werner, where he was informed that the Count had refused to join them. He felt relieved that things were still under control, but he was still worried, as he kept hoping that Mazel would defeat the demon leader before anything worse could happen. Suddenly, to Werner's shock, everyone started shouting that victory was theirs. Werner, confused, asked what had happened. The troops said that the enemy was retreating. Werner felt unsure and started wondering if they had really won, and whether Mazel had already defeated the main enemy, as in the game's story. But that did not seem possible, because from what he remembered, Mazel only won after the Order of Knights was completely destroyed. Without thinking further, Werner shouted and told Lyman to gather the troops and quickly distribute supplies to them. Lyman felt confused and said that the enemy was already pulling back, but Werner replied that it did not matter and they still had to prepare. He then said that he was going to the main army and rushed ahead to speak with the king of the country. After hearing that the demons were falling back, Werner felt confused because it did not match the main story of the game. He wondered why the demons were withdrawing in an organized way instead of scattering and running away. Soon, when he heard that the demons were moving toward the forest, he realized something and quickly shouted that he was heading to the main army. While rushing there, Werner noticed that the path was very narrow and filled with many dead bodies. Just moving through that area was extremely tiring for him. He also wondered why he was running at full speed, but he could not stop himself because he was the only one who knew the danger that would come in the next few hours. When he finally reached the main force, the guards stopped him and said that he could not enter, as they were not allowed to let anyone in without proper reporting, and he needed to come with the head of his unit first. Everyone knew that if Werner wasted time there, then his information would be useless, so he had to somehow get a direct audience with the Crown Prince. Just as he was thinking about what to do, he started hearing others talking happily about their success in defeating the leader and watching the demons run away. Hearing these talks, Werner felt shocked that everyone believed they had already won, which meant he had very little time left. Soon he heard that the royal grandson was planning to chase the demons into the forest, so he had no choice and shouted that he had something urgent to report. Hearing this, the Crown Prince looked at him, while the guards began shouting at Werner for daring to speak directly. The Crown Prince, curious, asked what was happening. The guards said that Werner was just a soldier from the left side and that they were trying to send him away, but the prince ordered them to let Werner come forward. When Werner stepped inside, the prince asked who he was. Werner replied that he was Werner Zerfeld from Count Zerfeld's household. The prince felt surprised to hear that Werner was the son of the Minister of Ceremonies and then asked what he wanted. Werner said that the prince must order the troops to retreat. Hearing this, everyone started murmuring, wondering what Werner was saying. Werner knew that such a reaction was expected because they had no idea about what was coming next. Some people even tried to shout at him, but the prince stopped them and asked Werner what made him say that. Werner explained that the enemy's behavior was strange, as everyone believed that the enemy leader had already been defeated by the knights. People agreed with that, but Werner said loudly that it was not true because the enemy was not retreating or fleeing, but was actually withdrawing in an organized way. He explained that all the enemies, even the creatures that seemed mindless, were moving together, which meant it was likely a trap to draw the knights into the forest, where those creatures had the advantage. Hearing this, the Crown Prince quickly ordered that all forces should retreat and that the knights should be called back and regroup with the remaining troops. The soldiers agreed and rushed to send the message. The prince then asked Werner if he had anything more to say. Werner replied that the royal grandson should be assigned to guard the capital's main gate. The prince agreed and gave the order. Then he asked if that was everything, and Werner said yes. Then the Crown Prince told Werner that he had to return to his camp and bring his troops to regroup with the central forces, as his work was not finished yet. Werner smiled and agreed. After that, he returned to his unit, where Lyman asked how it went. Werner said that he had managed to warn them not to fall into the enemy's trap, and once the knights returned, they would prepare for a full attack. He also added that they had to move and join the central forces. Hearing this, Lyman felt surprised that Werner had received a direct order from the prince and said it was something to celebrate. Werner felt confused about why it was a happy moment. Just then, Hermione arrived. Seeing her, Werner asked why she was there. Hermione said that she needed to talk to him urgently. Werner replied that they had new orders and by the prince's command, they had to move to the center for the coming battle. Hermione felt confused, so Werner explained that the enemy's retreat was actually part of their plan. Hermione was surprised and then apologized for her earlier behavior and thanked Werner for his help, saying that if he had not sent support, she might not have survived. She then stepped closer and asked Werner to guide them on battle strategy for the left side forces. Seeing her determination, Werner realized that he could not refuse. The scene then shifted to a few hours later, where Werner, along with his troops and other supporting forces, reached the central area near the main camp. Werner was completely tired, while Lyman looked pleased and told him to take some rest, as many groups, including the First Family, had asked Werner for advice along the way. Lyman praised Werner a lot for his planning skills, but Werner felt it was nothing special, as he believed he was only using knowledge from his past life. Suddenly, a knight arrived and announced that the Crown Prince had given Lord Werner the authority to command the troops. He would now lead several noble units and take position on the right side of the main force to prepare for the enemy attack. Werner accepted the order without saying much, but he felt very surprised, as he was now in charge of many aristocratic families' forces. Lyman, Organ, Barkey, and the others started congratulating him for this big responsibility. But Werner felt confused about what the Crown Prince was thinking, since he was just a student fighting his first battle. Seeing Werner so tense, Lyman told him not to worry too much, as even in his first battle, he had done very well. While others took the demon stampede lightly, Werner had made a strong plan and had already helped secure their success. They also said that they would give their full support to Werner. In truth, Werner felt nervous and uneasy, as everyone, including Lady Hermine, was giving him too much credit. He knew that he was only using his knowledge of what would happen in the future and had just planned things based on that. Even so, the responsibility placed on him felt too heavy. Soon, he realized that his tiredness was catching up to him, so he knew he had to push through it until Mazel defeated the demon leader. He clenched his fists and forced a small smile, thinking that he needed to plan the formation for his troops. At the same time, he quietly hoped that Mazel would defeat the demon leader as quickly as possible. The scene then shifted to Mazel, where everyone was praising him, as his potions were very helpful and he was also fighting really well. A girl even asked him why he had brought so many potions. Mazel smiled and said that a friend had told him to bring them, and that he believed Werner was very smart and always helped him. He also shared that Werner had told him to keep doing what he usually did and to stay alert. Everyone then asked if Werner was also part of the demon stampede battle. Mazel said yes, and since Werner was an aristocrat, everyone felt surprised that Mazel, a commoner, was friends with a noble. The girl was even more surprised, as she had heard that the main forces were struggling, but Mazel said confidently that Werner was fine, as he was well prepared and very skilled with the spear. At that moment, one of Mazel's friends said that they needed to find the enemy's commander quickly for the sake of Mazel's friend. Mazel agreed and said that he would do his best. Suddenly, they were attacked, and everyone quickly moved down to avoid it. When they looked ahead, they realized that they had found the target, as the demon commander was standing right in front of them. The demon looked like a girl with feathers on her back, almost like a crow, and she even praised the humans for managing to come this far. On Werner's side, he knew that during the first demon stampede, the Crown Prince was supposed to die, and after that everything would fall apart, so he had to prevent that from happening. He also understood that after this, the next phase would likely turn into a full-scale war. Because of this, Werner kept checking the situation again and again. This time, he learned that the units under his command had already received orders from the Crown Prince and were moving as planned. They had also accepted his battle strategy and troop formation. He then got more information that the injured were being sent back to the capital along with a royal figure. On hearing this, Werner realized that it was the royal grandson. At present, the forces were pulling back while reorganizing around the prince's group, which still had enough strength. Lyman came and praised Werner, saying that because of him they had avoided being overwhelmed. While Werner was moving to the right side of the main force, the Crown Prince was calmly managing everything and keeping the situation under control. Now that the demon stampede had failed, Werner knew that the next move would likely be a full-scale attack from the enemy. Still, he felt surprised at the Crown Prince, as even in such a difficult situation, he had not left the main camp. Just then, a knight came and reported that Lord Rheinish's unit had been organized and that Lady Degenkolb and Sir Gurka's units had also finished deploying after the change in command. But Werner felt tense, wondering why the prince would let a student like him lead such elite soldiers. In truth, Rheinisch, Degenkolb, and Gurka were among the finest fighters in the country. Werner greeted them, but deep inside, he kept thinking about their status. Since Rheinisch and Degenkolb were nobles, their ranks were similar, but Gurka was a mercenary, so Werner addressed him with respect as Sir. Rheinisch spoke with Werner and said that for a first campaign, it was impressive how well Werner had understood the enemy's movements. Werner knew that Rheinisch had far more experience than him, yet he was still being humble. Werner also understood that even though they were highly skilled and experienced, they had no choice but to follow him because of the Crown Prince's order. Still, a part of Werner felt uneasy, as he feared the possibility of being betrayed on the battlefield even after winning against the demons. Degenkolb stepped forward and praised Werner, saying that based on what she had heard from others who followed his advice, she was glad to fight under his command. She even asked Gurka if it was true. Gurka agreed, saying that as a mercenary, he would do his best to carry out every order, and everyone accepted that. Werner then asked them all to listen as he explained the current state of the battle and confirmed their strategy. The scene then shifted to the left side, where the first family unit had gathered to plan their next move. Timo said that they would review their movements as one combined force. According to the information, the enemy numbers had increased and gathered together, and it seemed that the forest goblins had also joined the demon side, giving them a slight advantage, though it was not too serious. He noted that the goblins were getting scared by magic attacks, so he told the magic users to fight in a way that would weaken their morale. For their formation, the first and second knight groups would fight while slowly pulling back, then split to the left and right sides. While those sides held the line as a shield, the center would attack through the gaps between them. Everyone shared their ideas during the discussion, but Tyrone, who felt jealous of Werner, refused to follow the plan, especially because he felt it lacked the spirit of bravery. Timo said that Marcus Norporth, the commander of the left side, had already approved the plan, and even Hermine said that Lord Werner's strategy was very innovative. So Timo sent Hermine to support Marcus Norporth's forces. Tyrone was still unhappy, but Timo agreed with Werner's plan, as even after the losses they had taken, Werner's squad was the one that managed to outnumber the demons. They had thought they defeated the leader, but it seemed someone else was still controlling things from behind, so they had to continue searching. This time, the first family felt more confident, as they believed that if things became serious, they would be the ones to handle it. But Timo did not want that, as it could bring more danger for everyone. The scene then shifted back to Werner, where he saw that the knights had started moving, so he decided that his cavalry should move as well and gave the order to charge. They made a strong start, as their basic fighting style was already well practiced. Werner had also placed the knights from different families under new leaders. Since their numbers had increased, he quickly set up a system of messengers to pass orders to the captains. If they kept working like this, everything would go smoothly. While fighting, Werner saw that the tactics were working well, but he still felt unsure about magic, as it was a mystery to him. Because once it was used, it disappeared instantly, and he could not understand the logic behind it. Even though everyone was praising Werner for his planning and strategy, which caused the enemy to panic, Werner kept giving the credit to the Crown Prince because he knew that without knowing the future, he would not be such a great planner. Suddenly, a knight came up to him and introduced himself as Wachtel from the 2nd Knight Brigade. Werner greeted him and asked what he needed. Wachtel said that he wanted to discuss the actions on the right side, as after their next attack they wanted his unit to work together with the right flank to push back the enemy. Werner understood that Wachtel meant they wanted to coordinate with his forces. He then asked about the condition of the 2nd Knight Brigade. Wachtel replied that their losses were increasing, but they were still holding their ground for now. In truth, Werner had wanted the knights of the main force to stay near the camp to protect the prince, but because of the current plan, the 1st and 2nd Knight Brigades had been spread far across the battlefield. So Werner came up with a new plan and told Wachtel to join the right flank and move closer to the main unit to defend it. Wachtel asked what would happen after that. To his surprise, Werner said that he himself would go to the center to assist the Crown Prince. Wachtel started shaking and stared at Werner intensely. Seeing this, Werner felt a little scared and wondered if Wachtel was upset because he was risking his own life for the prince. Werner also thought that since the 2nd Knight Brigade was already tired, they might want some rest, but since he did not know the full situation on the left side, it was hard for him to decide everything clearly. Still, as they were closest to the main unit, they were the best choice to move quickly. So Werner calmly explained that no other unit could take this role right now, and he had to do whatever he could with his own forces. Suddenly, to his surprise, Wachtel bowed in front of him and said loudly that he respected his determination and promised that they would hold the right side. Werner then realized that Wachtel was not angry at all. In fact, Wachtel shouted that Werner had become his inspiration and quickly left from there. Just then, Lyman came running toward Werner and stopped in front of him. Seeing blood on him, Werner asked what had happened. As Lyman wiped the blood from his face, Werner declared that the Zerfeld unit would now move to support the center near the main camp. Hearing this, Lyman understood that they were going to act as a shield for the Crown Prince. He also said that he was surprised to see a knight from the brigade get so excited and show such respect, and to be so loyal to a strategist of Werner's age. Werner then realized what Wachtel's reaction had really meant. Still, Werner believed that they were only buying time until Mazel defeated the final enemy, as he never wanted to become a shield or sacrifice himself. That was why he did not feel proud about it. Lyman then became emotional and started acting very devoted toward Werner, saying that he would do his best to serve him well. Werner then gave the order to move forward again, break the enemy's front line, and use that push to protect the Crown Prince. The scene then shifted to Mazel's group, where they were feeling exhausted because the demon in front of them kept regenerating again and again. They were also surprised that Mazel was still holding his ground against such a strong enemy. They discussed where they should strike to stop it, while the girl felt tense seeing the demon recover repeatedly. Even in that moment, some light talk happened between them, but Mazel stayed focused on the fight. They also mentioned that because of Werner's advice, they had enough recovery potions to keep going. Maisel noticed that everyone was tired and only the potions were helping them stay on their feet. He wondered what to do next, as he felt he was not as smart as Werner. Then he remembered Werner's words, telling him not to rush and just be himself. Maisel thought about it and recalled that Werner had once said he had a strong memory, which was something he was better at, so he decided to observe carefully and think again. Suddenly, he understood something and, with a smile, told his team that he had come up with a plan. On Werner's side, Degenkolb and Barky felt surprised to hear that Lord Werner wanted to assist the Crown Prince. The senior officer agreed, as Werner was now ordering them to push forward again, break the enemy formation, and then move toward the front of the main force. Degenkolb looked shocked at first, but soon she apologized and said that she understood. She then told Barky that Lord Werner might become a key support of their country in the future. Barky smiled and said that it would surely bring great success. Reinisch also agreed, saying that Werner had shown enough skill and courage by choosing to act as a shield for the Crown Prince. Goethe agreed as well, and they talked about how impressive it was for someone so young to think like that. Reinisch even felt a little ashamed when he remembered how he was during his own student days. Someone advised Lord Reinisch not to rush into such danger, but Reinisch replied that protecting the Crown Prince was a great honor for him. Organ also agreed, saying that now they just had to fight with full strength to support Werner, and they were grateful to him. After that, the scene showed them fighting again, as the number of enemies kept increasing. Just then, a messenger returned and told Werner that all the messages had been delivered to the units. Hearing this, Werner gave a loud order for everyone to push forward. The fight started again. They had to reach the main unit, so they began moving back while staying in formation. But Werner noticed that his voice was not enough to reach everyone, so it would take time to pass the orders. For now, they had to keep their defense strong while slowly moving toward the front of the main force. After that, they would leave the right side to the 2nd Night Brigade. The only thing Werner could hope for now was that the left side would not collapse, as he was fighting at the center. The scene then shifted to the left side, where the 1st Family Unit was also fighting. They had been ordered to break through the demon lines. Marquis Norporth praised the 1st Family for using such a sensible plan, but Hermine said that the strategy was actually given by Lord Werner of Count Zerfeld's family. Marquis Norporth asked again if it was really that same young student. Hermine confirmed it and explained that before they moved, Werner had advised her personally. He had suggested forming a wall of shields to slow the enemy, then attacking through the gaps, and even using the fallen enemies as cover while pulling back. Hearing this, Marquis Norporth agreed that Werner was more than impressive. He then decided that he would report this to the Crown Prince. After that, the scene shifted to the center of the main force where the Imperial Guard, under the Crown Prince's command, was clearing a path through the demon horde and fighting without rest. Just then, Werner's family unit arrived from behind. A knight gave the signal and ordered his men to pull back and make space for Werner's forces to move forward. Werner then ordered his troops to take the front and follow the plan. They moved ahead with confidence, thinking that once they got a short break, they would secure the area around the prince. In the middle of the chaos, some guards were talking about Lord Werner, asking which one he was. When they learned that he was the slim young man leading the charge, they were surprised that he had just come out of school and belonged to a civil servant family. They felt that Werner would have to work very hard in the future to serve the Crown Prince well. Soon, all of Werner's forces were fully engaged in the fight. At that moment, Werner told Lyman that he would step back for a while to focus on giving commands and asked him to hold the front line until he returned. Lyman smiled and agreed. Werner felt amazed at Lyman's energy even in such a tense situation. Now, Werner hoped that after taking heavy losses, they would soon shift toward pulling back as there were many wounded to manage, and adjusting troop numbers, reorganizing command, and fighting at the same time was very difficult. Werner felt tense, knowing he had to act as a proper commander and handle everything together. The Imperial Guards were behind them, which gave some support, but also meant there was no easy way to retreat. Deep down, Werner knew that if they were not there, he might have already tried to run away, but in this situation everyone had to stand and protect the front. Suddenly, Werner ordered the messengers to signal the hunters, saying it was time to bring out their special plan. Chapter 7. Actually, it was the hunters using slingshots as part of Werner's plan. Werner gave the order for the hunters to begin the counterattack. The slingshots fired at the goblins, and flames quickly spread around them. Because of this, the goblins started panicking. In truth, the shots were improvised fire bombs made from perfume oil and flame pots. Unlike magic, the fire would not disappear quickly and had a much stronger effect. The demons rolled around desperately after getting burned, and as they struggled, other demons rushed into them and got blocked by the chaos. At that moment, Werner ordered his army to push forward. Because of the flames, the enemy formation broke apart and a gap opened between the enemy's first and second lines. This became the perfect chance for Werner's forces to gain the advantage. It also gave them enough time to pull back and reorganize for a while. Werner wanted to keep repeating the slingshot attack again and again, but they did not have enough supplies because the perfume oil they used had already cost them a huge amount of money. Since it was a valuable item, Werner knew very well that it was not easy to get more of it. But because Werner's father used perfume oil for diplomatic events, Werner used his father's name to buy large amounts of it. Deep down, Werner knew that his father was going to be angry with him, but he believed it was necessary for everyone's safety, so he had no choice. After that, they continued attacking in the same way for as long as the oil lasted. And still, Werner kept wondering how much longer they could continue like this. The scene then shifted to Maisel's side, where Maisel and his friends were still fighting. But Maisel felt tense again, as the demon's body was regenerating very quickly. He shared that he had noticed one part of the demon's body healing much faster, while the rest recovered more slowly. Anna felt surprised hearing this, while Lugans smiled and said that he understood what Maisel was trying to say. Maisel explained that they did not know exactly what that part of the demon's body was, but there was a high chance that it was responsible for the regeneration. Anna then asked if they should focus all their attacks on that part. Maisel replied that he would continue pretending to attack the center of the demon, and once its attention shifted toward him, then Lugans and Anna should move into position and strike the left side with everything they had. Anna felt scared that Maisel might get hurt during the plan, but Maisel assured everyone that he would be fine and that they had to do this, because if they failed, many things would become dangerous. Maisel then told Rick that if the situation got worse, he had to throw a recovery potion toward him. Rick agreed. After that, Maisel told everyone to fight with all the strength they had left. Lugans smiled and told Maisel to make sure to protect himself first. Even in such a tense moment, Maisel smiled back and replied with an okay. Then all of them rushed toward the demon and attacked using the formation they had planned. The demon was still thinking that Maisel was using the same old strategy of attacking from the front. But suddenly, Anna and Lugans attacked from the left side, which completely shocked the demon. Now the humans finally had the upper hand, as they were able to cut through the demon's body. Suddenly, Anna noticed something like a treasure chest inside the demon. Seeing that, Maisel felt confused and wondered what it was. The demon then started laughing, imagining the despair on the humans' faces when they would see that the other demons and monsters had already wiped out the knights. It laughed even more while saying that when they returned to the kingdom, all they would find would be a sea of corpses. Maisel became completely furious and started shouting, asking the demon what it had just said. Suddenly, the demon began laughing even more after seeing the tense expression on Maisel's face. While still laughing, the demon slowly fell to the ground and died. Anna and Lugans started celebrating their victory, but Maisel quickly came to them and told them that the demon had said the knights were being destroyed by the other demons. He then said that they had to return to the kingdom immediately. Anna and Lugans were completely shocked after hearing that. The scene then shifted back to Werner's side, where the battle was still continuing. By now, they had run out of flame pots. Werner ordered the hunters to withdraw from the fight and prepare the horses from the Zerfeld estate. Werner had started wondering what to do next because this time he had no clear idea. He could only think about somehow escaping from the demons. But suddenly Werner noticed something strange as the goblins looked a little confused. Werner immediately shouted and ordered everyone to push the demons back. Everyone felt surprised by his sudden order, but Lyman confidently announced that Lord Werner must have a plan, since the enemies looked shaken this time, so they should attack and force them back now. Everyone agreed and fiercely rushed forward to attack the enemies. Hermine came and asked about the situation. Marquis Norporth replied that thanks to the royal grandson's support, reinforcements had arrived in time, and even the enemies had calmed down a little, so they could now fight more carefully. After that, Marquis Norporth started moving toward the battlefield himself. Hermine curiously asked where he was going, and Marquis Norporth smiled and said that he was thinking of joining the battle personally. He then asked if Hermine also wanted to join. Hermine smiled in return. In the next scene, Timo, Hermine, Degenkolb, Rheinisch, Guica, Tyrone, Marquis Norporth, Barkey, and Organ were all fighting with everything they had. Slowly they started gaining control of the battlefield. The moment Werner heard that they had won, he felt completely shocked. Everyone began gathering around him and congratulating him on their victory. Werner himself was surprised because he had become so focused on the battle that he had no clear idea of how the overall situation had turned out. At that moment, he started thinking that maybe his father would finally feel proud of him. But just as he thought that, Werner suddenly collapsed from exhaustion. Lyman quickly caught him before he could fall to the ground and shouted for someone to bring a potion immediately. Even while unconscious, deep inside, Werner felt truly happy, because he had survived the battle and was still alive. In the next scene, everything suddenly changed, and it showed a man lying inside a coffin while people around him talked about how talented he had been. But in the end, he was still only a civil servant. The man had died while protecting his younger brother. It was then shown that Werner was also standing there, but at that time, he was still a child. Werner felt frustrated hearing the people speak so casually. saying that the dead man had even been engaged to the eldest daughter of the first family, yet the girl herself was nowhere to be seen. Werner felt completely confused, wondering why everyone was talking like that even after a child had died. As Werner started leaving the place, people began talking about him as well, wondering whether Werner also had talent, or if he too would end up as just another civil servant who would die someday. Soon after stepping outside, Werner heard the sound of a slap and saw a boy holding his cheek. He then realized that the girl standing there was his brother's fiancée. Werner felt shocked when he heard the girl saying that she was actually happy now, because she no longer had to marry someone from a civil servant family. Werner started wondering if this world was truly real, because it felt far too cruel to him. In his eyes, those people were not acting like humans at all, but more like monsters. Soon, he began hearing everyone's laughter around him. The sound slowly faded, and suddenly the scene shifted back to the battlefield, where everyone was desperately fighting the demons just to survive. At that moment, Werner suddenly woke up from his bed and realized that it had all been a dream. He then started thinking about his brother's former fiancée, but because when he had met the first family before, she had not been there. Soon Werner remembered the demon stampede and the battle he had taken part in, but the moment he tried to move, a sharp pain spread through his body. Just then, Werner's mother, Claudia, came into the room and told him not to move, as he was still being treated and had been asleep for an entire day, which had made everyone worried sick. Seeing her, Werner immediately apologized. Norbert then gave Werner a potion to drink, and while drinking it, Werner noticed that everyone around him was genuinely worried about him. And even then, he was still anxious about what had happened during the demon stampede. Claudia gently told him not to worry anymore because they had already won the battle. Werner felt relieved and happy, realizing that the cries of victory he had heard were not part of a dream, but reality. Claudia then told him that once he was able to speak properly, he had to report to his father. In the next scene, Werner was sitting in front of his father, who was praising him greatly and saying that he could not even scold him after everything he had done. Werner looked confused and asked what he meant. His father, Ingo Fati, explained that an envoy had come from the royal family. Soon after that, people from the first family and Rheinish's family had also arrived. Ingo Fati even mentioned that many others had come to visit and ask about Werner. He then shared that all of this would help Werner greatly in the future, and that in 5 days he would have the chance to receive a Medal of Honor from the Crown Prince himself. Werner first apologized to his father for all the trouble and inconvenience he had caused, but Ingo Fati still praised him, saying that his clever ideas had saved many lives. He then asked if Werner was feeling better now, and Werner replied with a yes. Ingo Fati then said that he still wanted to have a serious talk later about the expensive perfume oil Werner had used. However, until the ceremony, Werner did not need to attend school and should take proper rest instead. After saying that, Ingo Fati left the room, and Werner felt truly happy inside. Just then, Norbert came in and told Werner that there were some documents he needed to check. Werner opened the papers and saw that State Viscount Cranley and Maitag had died, while the militant baron had been seriously injured. Werner realized that the nobles had also suffered losses, and many students were among the dead as well. Even though he did not know all of them personally, they were still his schoolmates. He then asked Norbert to send a personal representative on his behalf to attend the funerals. He also said that if any of the families had younger siblings, he wanted to support their admission into the academy next year in the name of the Count family. Norbert replied with a yes and quietly left the room. After Norbert left, Werner sat there in confusion. So many people had died, yet he wondered why he was able to stay so calm. He started thinking that maybe this feeling of distance existed because he still saw this world as a game. Still, if this world truly followed the game's story, then the victory they achieved this time had already changed many events. Werner could only hope that these changes would not negatively affect the hero's journey in the future. At the same time, he felt somewhat relieved because looking back at everything that had happened, he realized that the Crown Prince's decisions could be trusted. And if he remembered the story correctly, the next major conflict in the hero's tale would take place at the Warisa Fortress. Now, the real question was whether things would still follow the original game's story. Werner knew that he could not do much about the future right now, but at least he could strengthen their defenses in the meantime. This demon stampede had come straight toward them, so he had managed by using the knowledge he remembered from the game. But if they had to fight enemies that could think and plan, then proper group warfare and teamwork would become extremely important. Even though Werner was the son of a count, he still did not hold a title himself, and because of that, he would have to depend on Max and his trusted men to spread these fighting methods to others. However, the news about the Demon Lord's revival had still not spread everywhere. Werner also knew that this world valued individual strength and personal glory above all else. Because of that, many people would resist the ideas he was trying to introduce. So he needed to make them understand how important teamwork and strategy truly were. Since the Demon Lord was going to return, the strength and movements of the demons would definitely change. Werner believed that once people witnessed it themselves, they would finally realize how dangerous and unusual the situation really was. While Werner was thinking about all this, a man named Frentzen entered the room and said that he had been chosen to personally represent Werner at the funerals. Werner handed him several items and instructed him that if any family was in need of help, those should be given to them immediately. After that, Werner decided to focus on their next move while also dealing with the aftermath of the demon stampede. At the same time, he felt happy that he did not have to attend school for a while. The scene then shifted to a few days later, where Werner and Maisel were sparring with each other for practice. Since Maisel was fighting very aggressively, Werner smiled and asked him to take it a little easy, as he was still supposed to be recovering. Maisel laughed and replied that he would never go easy on the hero of the demon stampede. Werner immediately told him to stop making fun of him like that, but Maisel kept praising him, saying that everyone in the school was talking about how Werner had understood the enemy's movements, discovered the trap, and launched a counterattack at the perfect moment when the enemy was starting to collapse. Maisel then added that Lord Hubertus had also praised Werner greatly. Werner looked confused and asked who Lord Hubertus was. Maisel replied that it was the Crown Prince himself. Werner quickly told him to stop, as he was making the whole thing sound far bigger than it really was. But Maisel continued, saying that Lord Hubertus had talked about the strange fighting style Werner created, which looked like a porcupine formation and was extremely effective. Werner then realized that the prince was referring to the phalanx formation he had used during the battle. Suddenly, Maisel slammed several letters onto the table while speaking. Werner curiously asked what the letters were about. Maisel explained that they were letters from the families of the people who had died. When he attended the funerals, those families had asked him to give the letters to Werner because they were deeply moved that a noble like him had treated them with such kindness. Werner replied that usually people only cared about adventurers who were nobles or officially recognized, but since the situation had been so unexpected, things had turned out differently this time. Suddenly, Maisel started praising Werner again. He said that the people Werner wanted to protect had survived, and not only were they happy that peace had returned, but they were also grateful that someone was mourning the dead properly. Maisel admitted that the ones who had died could never return, but he still believed it was a good thing that people like Werner existed in their lives. Werner quickly stopped him and said that if anyone deserved praise for the battle, it was Maisel, not him. Maisel replied that Werner did not need to be so modest. After that, both of them started arguing over who deserved the credit more. In the end, Werner asked if Maisel had learned anything about the black jewel they had found. Maisel answered that nobody knew what material the jewel was made from. Hearing that, Werner quietly wondered if such an item had even existed in the original game. Werner then thanked Maisel for his achievements as the hero of the battle, but Maisel begged him to stop, saying he had already heard enough praise at school. He complained that to escape from all that attention, he still had to deal with invitations from aristocrats, and he had no idea how to refuse them, what to wear, or how to behave during the medal ceremony. Werner wanted to ignore all of that, but he understood Maisel's situation, so he agreed to teach him properly. Werner also explained that Maisel could simply decline invitations by saying he was still a student, and that wearing his school uniform was perfectly acceptable for the ceremony. Maisel looked surprised and asked if he could really wear his school uniform. Werner replied with a yes because it was considered proper formal clothing. In the end, Werner hoped that the victory celebration would pass peacefully without any problems, but things never went the way he wanted. During the celebration ceremony, the king of the capital suddenly announced that Werner was being granted the title of Viscount. Hearing that, Werner was completely shocked and could not understand how something like this had happened to him. Actually, during the victory celebration held at the royal palace, Werner thought that everything was going smoothly. While standing there, he was quietly thinking about what would happen next. First, medals and praise were given to Prince Hubertus. After that, praise was given to Ingo Fati, as his unit had played a major role in the recent battle. Then the king suddenly called out none other than Werner, the legitimate son of Lord Ingo Fati, and announced that he would be granted the title of Viscount. Werner respectfully thanked His Majesty for his kindness, but deep inside he could only think about one thing. Why him? As everyone in the hall turned their eyes toward him, Werner became nervous. He felt as if all those nobles were already thinking about ways to get rid of him in the future. Even while feeling tense, a part of his mind was strangely focused on how modern the palace uniforms looked. At first, he wondered if it was because this world was based on a video game, but soon he realized that none of that really mattered right now. Next came the Order of Merit ceremony, and Maisel's name was called. Werner felt confused because in his mind, Maisel should have been the first person to receive honors. Still, he did not dare question the decision openly. While Maisel was receiving his medal and praise from the king, Werner quietly thought about how much he wished Maisel's family could see him standing there proudly in formal clothes. But Maisel had not even informed his parents about the ceremony at all. Actually, the reason Mazel had not informed his parents was because they lived very far away from the capital, and it was impossible for them to reach the palace in time for the ceremony. Werner also heard people talking about the skywalk boots and wondered why those items were suddenly being sold all around the capital. He decided that he would look into that matter later. After Mazel received his medal and started walking back, he looked toward Werner and smiled brightly. Seeing that, Werner also felt happy because Mazel always managed to handle things so naturally and effortlessly. Soon after that, Marquis Norporth also received recognition and merit for his role in the battle. Once all the praise, awards, and formal announcements were finally over, everyone in the hall began talking and interacting with each other. Werner quietly stood there, simply watching the nobles and officers around him. Mazel then walked over and praised Werner again for his great work during the battle. But Werner replied that the real problem was only beginning now because everyone in the hall was staring at him with strange and unsettling eyes. He honestly had no idea what he was supposed to do next. Mazel then asked whether making Werner a Viscount was basically the king's way of saying that Werner would later assist Lord Ingofati and eventually become his successor. He wondered if that was the real reason behind the celebration. Werner replied that certain responsibilities naturally came with noble rank. But deep inside, Werner understood the true meaning behind the king's decision. In simple terms, the king was saying that even though Werner was still a student, he would eventually take over the count's household, and as a noble, he would now have to take part in military duties and other important matters. Mazel thought that the king's decision made perfect sense. After all, Werner already had an impressive record, so it was natural for people to trust him like that. Werner agreed on the outside, but deep inside, he felt troubled, because for him, the situation could not have become any worse. Even though there was a high chance that the capital would be attacked again in the future, he would now have to spend much more time around the royal palace carrying out his duties. And to Werner, that only meant one thing. The more time he spent on the battlefield, the greater the chances of him getting killed someday. Mazel then laughed lightly and said that Werner was probably the only person in the kingdom who could treat receiving a noble title like bad news. Werner sighed in frustration, feeling that Mazel truly did not understand how difficult the situation really was for him. While they were talking, Marquis Norporth suddenly approached them. Both Werner and Mazel quickly greeted him respectfully. Werner then bowed deeply and apologized for his rudeness during the battle. Marquis Norporth replied that it was fine as long as Werner understood the situation properly now. He also mentioned that he had spoken with the Crown Prince personally. Werner looked confused and asked what His Highness had said. Marquis Norporth explained that the prince had told him not to scold Werner too harshly because he was still very young. And after thinking about it himself, Marquis Norporth decided that there was no real reason to scold Werner anymore. Hearing that, Werner bowed once again and thanked Marquis Norporth for his kindness and consideration. After that, Marquis Norporth smiled slightly and left, saying that he would watch Werner's future career with great interest. Werner politely thanked him before he walked away. After Marquis Norporth left, Mazel curiously asked what that conversation had been about. Werner then explained that during the battle he had gone directly to the Crown Prince to warn him about the monsters. Normally, he should have first reported everything to his direct commanding officer, Marquis Norporth, but at that moment, there had not been enough time to convince the Marquis about the danger. Still, in Werner's eyes, allowing soldiers to ignore the chain of command whenever they wanted would eventually destroy discipline within the army. Hearing all of that, Mazel looked surprised and asked if they were really the same age because he could never think about things in such a serious way. Werner simply replied that he probably thought like that because he was raised as an aristocrat. Just then, someone else approached and interrupted their conversation. This time, it was Timo along with his daughter, Hermine. Timo immediately praised Werner for the way he had fought during the battle and then apologized for how rude he had acted before the demon stampede began. Werner politely replied that Timo did not need to apologize to him at all. But as Timo continued talking, Werner slowly realized that Timo was mostly trying to avoid giving a direct and honest apology. Instead, he seemed to be covering his embarrassment by speaking around the issue. Since both Timo and Werner's father held the rank of Count, Timo should normally have gone directly to apologize to the head of Werner's household, but if he had done that, the matter would have become a much bigger issue among the nobles. That was why Timo chose to apologize to Werner personally instead. Werner understood that relationships between nobles were always complicated and exhausting to deal with. At the same time, Werner started wondering about Tyrone. If Tyrone was not seriously injured, then why was he missing from the banquet hall? The thought bothered Werner a little, but he knew he could not ask about it directly. Timo then said that since their territories were neighboring lands, they should continue maintaining a good relationship from now on. Werner politely replied that both he and his father also hoped for a strong relationship between their families in the future. After Timo finished speaking and left, Hermione stepped closer to Werner and said that she would love to discuss battle strategies with him properly sometime in the future. Werner agreed politely, after which Hermione smiled and left as well. As Werner watched her leave, he quietly realized that judging from Hermione's attitude now, she no longer seemed to look down on his family for being civil servants like she once used to. The first thing Maisel said was that it looked like Werner was getting attention from every direction. Werner replied with a yes, but then added that it was nothing compared to what Maisel was dealing with. Maisel looked confused at first, but he quickly realized what Werner meant. One after another, nobles kept approaching Maisel and asking him to meet their daughters. One viscount even came with his 3-year-old daughter and asked Maisel to spend time with her in the future. Soon, even more people arrived with similar requests. Some girls were still little children, while others were far older. Watching all this, Werner became annoyed and wondered why these people were trying to push both tiny girls and old women toward Maisel. But at the same time, he understood that this was simply the attraction of a commoner who possessed the hero's skill. Werner then remembered that none of this attention would have happened if events had followed the original game's storyline. In the game, many royal knights and nobles, including the prince and his son, were supposed to die during the demon stampede. Once again, Werner started worrying about how much the story had already changed. Deep down, he could only hope that the fall of Weresa Fortress would still happen according to the original plot, even though many people would die there. After finally escaping from all those nobles, Maisel thanked Werner for saving him earlier and looked completely exhausted. Seeing that, Werner offered to treat him to lunch next time. After that, Werner quietly started wondering what would happen next, because this was only the beginning of everything. In fact, things had to continue this way, otherwise they would all be in serious trouble. The current peace existed only because the demons and monsters had been defeated for now. That also meant Maisel would eventually have to face even greater hardships in the future. At the same time, Werner felt frustrated with himself because, more than anything else, he was still mainly thinking about his own survival. Suddenly, a girl approached them and politely apologized for interrupting their conversation. The moment Werner saw her, he instinctively stepped forward without even thinking. The girl smiled softly and said that someone of account's status did not need to act so formally toward her. She then introduced herself as Laura Louise Weinzierl. The moment Werner heard her name, he was completely shocked. Laura was supposed to appear much later in the original game's storyline. In other words, the girl standing before him right now was none other than Princess Laura, the heroine of the game itself. Laura then politely asked if she could have a moment to speak with both of them. Laura then guided both of them through the palace and showed them where they needed to go. While walking, Maisel quietly whispered to Werner that the princess was incredibly beautiful, wasn't she? Werner casually replied that good looks were probably a requirement for royalty, but deep inside he was actually shocked, because they were heading far deeper into the castle than he had expected. In the original game, this entire section of the palace only became accessible after the royal palace had already been destroyed. But as they continued walking farther inside, both Werner and Maisel were completely overwhelmed by the sight before them. The place looked unbelievably beautiful and elegant, truly like a royal palace from a fantasy story. Then, to their greatest surprise, Crown Prince Hubertus himself was standing there waiting for them and warmly welcomed them inside. Werner was completely stunned because he had never expected the Crown Prince to personally invite them here. Soon, all of them sat together. Werner felt completely out of place because the Crown Prince, the game's heroine, and the main hero of the story were all sitting together in one room while he still saw himself as nothing more than a side character. Though if he thought about it properly, he was technically the noble among them, so Maisel should have been the one feeling awkward instead. But when Werner looked toward Maisel, he saw that Maisel looked perfectly calm, happy, and surprisingly dignified. After everyone settled down, Hubertus thanked both Werner and Maisel sincerely for saving him during the demon stampede. Both Maisel and Werner responded that it was not that big of a deal as they were only doing their duties and nothing more. But Werner was feeling a little tense for some reason and looked very nervous. Seeing that, Laura told them that there was no need to be so formal around her. Werner still looked hesitant, but when she asked again, he realized that he had no choice, so he finally started speaking normally. Werner said that he never expected to find her at the palace because he was sure that she was staying at the Great Temple of Finwë. Laura praised him for being so well informed. Werner replied that he had heard about it from his father. Hubertus nodded and said that it made sense, but deep inside, Werner actually knew that because it was part of the game. In the original story, when Maisel learned about it, he rushed toward Laura, who was staying at the temple at that time, and that was how they were supposed to meet. But now that they were meeting inside the palace instead, Werner was confused about whether this change was a good thing or not. Prince Hubertus then explained that Laura had received a divine message and returned to deliver it personally. The message spoke about the revival of the Demon Lord. Maisel looked shocked and asked if it was really true. Hubertus replied that it was true, although they still did not have enough proof to fully confirm it. Hearing all this, Werner thought that it actually made sense because there were stories about an ancient kingdom that had once been destroyed by the Demon Lord, and even now, the ruins of that kingdom still remained. Laura then explained that divine messages were not common knowledge, and that there were different levels to them. Only oracles who could receive divine messages were able to properly understand them. She added that the meaning behind this message was extremely important. That was why she had returned to the capital, so she could report it directly to her father. Werner was not sure whether the king truly believed the message or not, but since Crown Prince Hubertus was so certain after the recent demon stampede, he must have understood that the warning had some truth behind it. Still, the one thing Werner could not understand was why both he and Maisel had been summoned to the palace. Laura explained that there was a part in the divine message which suggested that the hero would play an extremely important role in the future. That was why she had invited Maisel, so they could meet him face to face. Hearing that, Werner finally understood. Even though heroes were rare, people with hero-type skills were always considered special. Still, Werner could not stop wondering how the capital planned to send a first-year student to defeat the greatest evil in the land. He thought that maybe, in the original game, the king had also received the divine message, and that was why Maisel had been sent on his journey to defeat the Demon Lord. But the biggest question for Werner was still why he himself had been summoned there. So he directly asked Crown Prince Hubertus about the reason. Hubertus replied that he wanted Werner to act as Maisel's bridge and shield. Maisel looked confused and asked what he meant by that. Werner then explained it to him. Since the divine messages could not be made public, the royal family could not openly keep summoning a commoner like Maisel to the palace whenever they wanted. So they needed someone who could make communication easier between both sides. Deep down, Werner understood that because the prince had survived and the kingdom was still stable, openly calling a commoner like Maisel would create political problems. And in a way, this whole situation was partly his own fault for changing the original storyline. Prince Hubertus then explained that while they continued searching for the truth behind the Demon Lord's revival, they intended to use every resource they had. Because of that, they wished to stay closely connected with Maisel. Maisel finally understood and said that it would look natural for a viscount like Werner to visit the castle, and they could also easily talk with each other at the academy. Hubertus agreed with him. Meanwhile, Maisel was still confused about why Werner was being called his shield. Werner explained that it was similar to how he had protected Maisel from the other nobles trying to manipulate him. At this point, every noble family in the kingdom would try to take Maisel under their wing. Because of that, it would become difficult for the royal family to negotiate with those nobles when they needed Maisel the most. That was why Werner had to act like a wall protecting him. Prince Hubertus then said that in that case, he expected Werner would not object to becoming Maisel's knight. But to the prince's surprise, Werner immediately apologized and refused the offer. He had several reasons for turning it down. As an excuse, Werner explained that he and Maisel were friends, not master and servant. He added that he would obey any order from the royal family if necessary, but for now, he had no intention of becoming Maisel's lord. Deep inside, Werner was terrified. Maisel was destined to fight the Demon Lord in the future, and if Werner officially became tied to him politically, then he would also get dragged into every dangerous conflict surrounding the hero. Princess Laura and Hubertus tried again to persuade Werner, giving different reasons why he should support Maisel more directly. But Werner had already realized that the princess was only suggesting it gently and was not forcing him. Because of that, he politely refused once again. In the end, Prince Hubertus accepted his answer, but still requested that Werner continue supporting Maisel's activities while he remained in the capital. Werner humbly agreed to that request. Deep down, he wanted to avoid it as well, but he knew that at this point, he no longer had any way to back out. After that, since Hubertus was preparing to leave, Werner stood up and politely said his goodbye to him. But deep down, Werner was actually happy. This time, Maisel would receive enough money and support to get the best armor and equipment. In the original game, because the prince and many others had died early, Maisel never received proper backing. Prince Hubertus then said that he was looking forward to Maisel's future, and after saying that, he took his leave. After the prince left, Werner started wondering how much more he could really do for his friend. Laura then apologized for her older brother's behavior, but Werner replied that there was no need for her to worry about it. Maisel was still confused about what the two of them were talking about, but Werner simply told him not to think too much about it. Maisel agreed immediately without questioning anything. Deep inside, Werner was relieved after seeing Laura and Prince Hubertus together. In the game, their relationship as siblings had not been shown very clearly, but now he finally felt assured about it. Soon, Werner realized that this was the perfect chance for Maisel and Laura to spend some time alone together. So he made an excuse, saying that he needed to use the restroom. The moment Werner stood up to leave, Maisel suddenly looked nervous and panicked for a second. Werner almost laughed seeing his reaction, but still calmly asked one of the maids to guide him to the restroom before leaving the room. As he walked away, Werner felt happy that he had managed to bring Maisel and Princess Laura closer together. Even if small details had changed from the game, he hoped that the overall story would still stay the same. But at the same time, Werner could not stop wondering whether Maisel would someday end up walking through the ruins of this palace like in the original story, or if the people living here now would survive instead of becoming corpses in the future. While he was lost in thought, two maids suddenly stopped him and apologized for interrupting him. They explained that they simply wanted to express their gratitude to him. Werner looked confused and asked what they meant by thanking him. One of the girls explained that her father was a knight, while the other said that her brother served under Count First's army. If Werner had not been there during the battle, both of them might have died in the demon stampede. So, at the very least, they wanted to thank him personally. Werner replied that it was fine and thanked them for their gratitude before heading toward the restroom. While inside, he could not help but think about how surprisingly good the bathroom facilities were. In the game, there had never even been anything like bathrooms shown at all. Soon, his thoughts shifted back to himself and the promise he had made to survive no matter what. There were times when he wondered if he could have done more during the demon stampede. Maybe he should have thought more about the students too, instead of simply believing that Maisel would protect everyone somehow. The guards, the maids, their families, Maisel, and the students at the academy all had real lives and real relationships in this world. Werner knew he was not arrogant enough to think that he alone could save everyone, and even Maisel would not be able to protect every single person by himself. Still, even after doing everything he could, Werner was unable to sleep peacefully. He realized that the same feelings probably applied to those two maids as well. They were simply happy because the people important to them had survived the battle. In the end, Werner decided that this was probably the best way to look at things moving forward. He could never compare himself to Maisel in terms of fighting strength, but he still had knowledge of the game. That meant he did not have to place the entire burden on Maisel's shoulders alone. Meanwhile, the scene shifted back to Maisel and Laura. Maisel curiously asked Princess Laura why Werner had refused the offer to become his superior. If Maisel officially became Lord Werner's knight, then fewer nobles and countries would bother him, which would reduce his troubles. And when the time came to defeat the Demon Lord, Werner would surely support him without hesitation. Because of that, Maisel honestly could not understand why Werner had refused an offer made directly by the prince himself. Laura smiled and explained that her brother had actually been testing Lord Werner's ambition. If the Demon Lord's revival was truly real, then Maisel was humanity's greatest hope. And if Maisel became Werner's knight, then Werner himself would gain enormous influence and power as well. She continued by saying that Werner was not the kind of person who placed his own interests first. However, her brother Prince Hubertus still believed that many people would try to use Maisel for their own benefit. That was why both the prince and the king believed it would be safest if Maisel belonged directly to the royal family and the kingdom itself. Laura also believed that Lord Werner understood that very well. Then Laura smiled softly and added that this was only her own guess, but she believed Werner simply wanted to remain Maisel's friend. Maisel focused on the word friend. Seeing his reaction, Laura explained that she also had friends who were precious to her, and because of that, she would never want to turn those relationships into one between master and servant. Maisel looked very surprised after hearing that, and Laura pretended to look hurt by his reaction. Maisel panicked immediately and started apologizing, only for Laura to laugh and admit that she had just been teasing him. Just like that, the two of them quickly became comfortable with each other and continued chatting happily together. After some time, Werner finally returned. The moment Maisel saw him, his face instantly brightened up. Laura then smiled and told Werner that Maisel had just been talking about the time the two of them got into a fight with some older students, and she asked if Werner also wanted to share his side of the story. Maisel immediately became nervous because Werner looked annoyed at that moment, but Laura quickly explained that she was the one who had asked Maisel about it. And like that, the three of them ended up spending a pleasant time together, talking happily inside the palace. Drexler said that Professor Ryden wanted to hear Maisel's stories about the demons, so they went there together. Professor Ryden was originally born as a commoner, but because of his talent and position as a professor, even Crown Prince Hubertus personally requested him to teach at the academy. Meanwhile, Werner kept thinking about how many people in this school were secretly working to support the prince's plans. That was exactly why Werner stayed cautious. He could not trust every professor to stand on his side because many of them were also keeping their eyes on him. So he could only hope that Maisel would listen to his advice and act carefully. While walking, Werner apologized to Drexler for causing him trouble. But Drexler laughed and said it was fine because he also wanted to gain favor from the future count. Werner immediately told him to stop joking like that. Drexler replied that he was not joking at all. After the Demon Stampede, Werner had already become famous, but after receiving the title of Viscount, his popularity had gone even higher. So now, according to Drexler, Werner seriously needed to find someone to settle down with. Otherwise, these noble girls would only become even more troublesome. Werner replied that settling down with someone sounded like an even bigger headache to him. Right now, he did not even have the time or peace of mind to think about that part of his future. More than anything, he wanted to avoid noble marriages and political engagements completely. Drexler nodded and said he understood what Werner meant. After that, Werner asked about the statue and what exactly they were supposed to do with it. Drexler answered that they simply had to carry it to the classroom. In the next scene, Maisel looked completely exhausted. Werner could only wait for the classes to end for the day because returning to town would make things easier. But even now, many people still kept their eyes on Maisel, which gave Werner a strange feeling of déjà vu from before. Because of that, Werner told Maisel that if he ever felt unsafe or uncomfortable, he could simply use his room inside the dormitory. Werner even offered him the key to his room. Hearing that, Maisel happily asked if Werner was really serious about it. Werner responded with a yes and handed the key to Maisel. Maisel thanked him for it and said that he would stay prepared for the worst and remain careful at all times. Maisel then asked about Werner's plans for the day. Werner replied that he only had to attend a briefing at the castle, and once it was finished, he would return home because he still had many things to prepare. Maisel nodded and then mentioned that he wanted Werner to meet someone who had helped him during the demon stampede. Hearing that, Werner immediately understood that Maisel was talking about Lugens. Lugens was an adventurer who had attended the reward ceremony and was also an important character in the game. He was supposed to become the hero's main partner in the future. Still, Werner remembered that there were actually 2 other people with them during the fight against the demon commander. Thinking about the game's story and Maisel's point of view, Werner agreed to meet him, but first asked how many people would be there. Maisel answered that it would only be 1 person. Werner agreed because he also had something important to discuss with Lugens anyway. He was not completely sure about it yet, but there was something that had been bothering him for some time, so he told Maisel that he would inform Lugens about the date and time later. The moment the bell rang, Werner quietly reminded Maisel to follow the plan they had discussed. Just as some classmates started approaching them, Maisel suddenly opened the classroom window and jumped out of it. Everyone inside was completely shocked seeing him leap from such a height, but Werner alone knew that only a hero like Maisel could jump from there without even getting injured. While everyone's attention stayed focused on Maisel, Werner quietly escaped through the hallway and left the academy. When Werner reached home, Norbert welcomed him and asked how things went at the castle. Werner replied that everything went smoothly. He also mentioned that he would not need to visit the castle very often anymore, so starting from the next day, he would be returning home earlier. After that, Werner told Norbert that there were several things he needed to work on personally. He planned to write them down and organize his own ideas first. Then he asked about his father. When Norbert informed him that Lord Ingolfati was still away from home, Werner remembered that the cleanup after the demon stampede was still ongoing. On top of that, rumors about the Demon Lord's revival were already spreading, so his father's work must have become extremely difficult. Norbert then asked Werner about his plans for the rest of the evening and whether he would be having dinner together with the family. Werner replied that he would not because he wanted to do some training first. After taking a bath, he planned to eat inside his own room. In truth, Werner simply wanted some quiet time to organize his thoughts properly. Hearing that, all the butlers, including head butler Norbert, looked completely surprised. The young master rarely shut himself inside his room like this. Still, they all decided they would do whatever they could to help him rest peacefully. Norbert smiled while watching the servants become so worried over Werner and calmly announced that everyone should quietly look after the young master tonight. The servants immediately agreed. After that, the scene showed Werner holding a spear while practicing alone. While training, Werner kept thinking about the coming days and the future ahead of him. His duties at the castle would not be too difficult to manage, and even his academy work was still under control. As for Maisel, Werner knew that Maisel could escape almost any dangerous situation because of his overwhelming physical abilities and strength. But if the revival of the Demon Lord truly became a serious problem with no other solution except fighting, then Werner himself would also need to become stronger and prepare properly for it. What troubled Werner even more was the fact that he had already met Laura and Lucy far earlier than they were supposed to appear in the original game story. Ever since childhood, after realizing that this world was actually the world of a game, Werner had tried his best not to forget anything. He used to write down important details from memory again and again before burning the papers afterward, making sure nobody would ever read them and mistake them for prophecies. And now, all of that knowledge was finally becoming useful for him. Still, something did not feel completely right. Until now, most things had happened close enough to what Werner remembered from the game. But the problem was the existence of the black stone Maisel received from the defeated monster. Werner had absolutely no memory of such an item existing in the game at all, even though it clearly seemed important. In the end, Werner realized that he actually knew far less than he believed. He could no longer understand how this living, breathing world truly connected to the game world inside his memories. Because of that, he decided he needed to calm himself and find a middle point between reality and the game knowledge he carried. Finally, Werner concluded that endlessly worrying about unknown things would not help him at all. So, for now, he simply had to move forward according to how the situation developed around him. And for that, he needed to prepare everything he could as quickly as possible. First, Werner planned to request permission from the Mazal company for a merchant convoy formation so he could gather equipment and supplies. After that, he intended to submit requests to both his father and Crown Prince Hubertus. As for the proposal regarding group warfare training, Werner knew it would be difficult to convince people because the news about the Demon Lord's revival had not become public yet. So he planned to discuss the matter with Max and the others first, then Werner decided that he would also meet Lugens and Mazel soon. Since the meeting was scheduled 2 days later, he planned to prepare a copy of the strange black stone beforehand. After that, everything would depend on how the situation unfolded. While Werner was deeply thinking about all these things, his mother Claudia suddenly arrived there. She called out his name several times, but Werner was so lost in thought that he did not hear her at all. Finally, Claudia loudly shouted his name, making Werner jump in surprise. He quickly apologized for getting too caught up in his thoughts. Claudia immediately scolded him for not resting properly and for practicing with a spear right after returning from school. Just when Werner tried apologizing again, she gave him another fierce look that instantly scared him. Without wasting another second, Werner hurried away to wash his face before leaving the training area. While walking away, Werner helplessly thought to himself that no matter what world it was, terrifying mothers truly existed everywhere. In the next scene, Hermione and Tyrone were talking with each other. Hermione explained that she planned to continue her training because if another demon stampede happened in the future, she wanted to earn the honor of being knighted personally by Princess Laura that time. Hearing that, Tyrone smiled. Soon, Hermione remembered hearing rumors that Fort Warisa was going to be restored, so she asked whether it was really true. Tyrone answered with a yes and explained that the information was correct. According to him, Marquis Neep had been placed in charge of the restoration work. Hermione looked surprised after hearing Marquis Neep's name and asked if it was truly him. Tyrone nodded again and said that their father, Count Timo, had personally confirmed it. After that, Tyrone asked whether Hermione was also thinking about going there. Hermione then asked if Marquis Neep's son would be joining as well. Tyrone immediately understood she was talking about Mangold and answered that he would definitely be there. Hearing that, Hermione suddenly looked excited and happily said that she would absolutely adjust her schedule for it because she also wanted to receive knighthood from Princess Laura someday. The scene then shifted toward Werner's estate, where the knights and soldiers were currently sparring and training with each other while practicing the combat methods Werner had taught them. After the training ended, Werner asked the soldiers whether the fighting style felt different compared to the demon stampede. The troops answered with a yes and said that they were slowly getting used to it and improving little by little. Lyman then walked over and pointed out that they also needed to think about what to do if the enemy numbers increased even more in the future. Werner nodded and told Lyman to let everyone take turns acting as the enemy target whenever he was not around. Lyman agreed to the idea and then asked if Werner also wanted a few extra lessons in horsemanship, since the one leading the charge also needed to stay careful during battle. Werner apologized and admitted that he would try to be more mindful about that from now on. Just then, another person stepped forward and announced that starting today he would become Werner's sparring partner. Werner thanked him and suggested they begin immediately. The sparring match soon started, and Werner struggled badly at first. Still, he somehow managed to find small openings during the fight and slowly started gaining a slight advantage. But in the end, Organ's experience was far greater. He quickly turned the situation around and defeated Werner without much difficulty. After winning, Organ walked closer to Werner and calmly praised him, saying that his movements had improved compared to before. Werner thanked him politely, though deep down he could not help wondering whether Organ was secretly being sarcastic with him or not. Werner was happy that the knights of his family were very strong, but he still wanted to catch up to them somehow. Still, since he was only a student, it was not something he could achieve easily. At that moment, Werner realized that his thoughts about surviving by running away from the capital were slowly falling apart after seeing the harsh reality. Then Organ said that he had started taking Werner a little more seriously after seeing him improve. Hearing that, Werner became very happy and proud, thinking that such praise from a knight was a great honor. Just then, Barky came there and asked Organ if he had not taken the sparring match a little too seriously. After that, he gave Werner some tips on how he could improve his current fighting style. Finally, after the training ended, Werner returned home, took a bath, and then left to meet Lugent. The scene then shifted to the bar where Werner greeted Lugent, and Lugent greeted him back as well. Then Mazel asked if Lugent believed him now. Lugent replied with a yes, saying that Werner did not seem arrogant like the other nobles. Werner remembered that Lugent did not like nobles very much, so meeting him as Mazel's friend had been the right choice. Suddenly, to Werner's surprise, Lugent shared that he had heard the same things about Werner from Gurka, but meeting him in person felt completely different. Hearing Gurka's name, Werner took a moment to remember him and then realized that he was the mercenary captain from back during the Demon Stampede. When Werner heard that Gurka had praised him for being skilled with a spear, he became completely overwhelmed and asked Lugens to pass his thanks to him. Soon, Werner started thinking that maybe he really could win against others someday if he kept training like this. Meanwhile, Lugens told him to count himself lucky because Gurka was not the type of person who casually praised a noble for doing something good. Werner then started thinking about Lugens himself. Lugens was a man with the skill called Weapon Master, which allowed him to fight skillfully with many kinds of weapons. Werner knew he could not compare him with Mazel, but from the beginning to the end of the story, the hero always saw Lugens as a dependable older brother who would always support him during battles. Soon, Lugens asked them to eat properly and ordered meat and other expensive dishes for them. He even asked whether the food was enough for Werner or not. Werner replied with a yes, but deep inside, he was still confused about what Lugens truly thought about him. Then, while they were eating, Lugens said that Mazel had mentioned Werner wanted to meet him, so he was sure Werner had not come there just for small talk. There had to be another reason behind it. Hearing that, Werner first asked if mercenaries and adventurers were sworn to secrecy. Lugens replied with a yes. Without thinking too much, Werner directly said that the Demon Lord had revived. Hearing that, Lugens immediately laughed and told him not to joke around. Werner seriously replied that it was not a joke at all. Hearing that, Lugens asked that if it was really true, then why Werner was talking about something so dangerous inside a bar. Werner explained that summoning him to a noble's residence would attract far too much attention, so it was safer to talk about it inside a noisy bar where people would have to listen carefully to hear such a conversation. Hearing all of that, Lugens became completely stunned and admitted that it was hard to believe Werner was still just a student. Werner thanked him for saying that. After that, Lugens asked why Werner was telling him such an important secret. Werner replied that it was because he wanted Lugens to help Mazel. Since Mazel would definitely be ordered someday to defeat the Demon Lord, Werner wanted Lugens to become Mazel's ally. Moreover, because Werner was acting as Mazel's connection to the royal family, their choices were still limited until they learned more about the situation. For now, Mazel was still a student and lacked real experience as an adventurer. That was where Lugens would play an important role because he would travel with Mazel and fight beside him. Mazel also interrupted and said that Lugens had real combat experience, so he wanted him to teach him everything he could. Lugens smiled and agreed, saying that he would make sure to train Mazel properly. Mazel happily thanked him for it. Then Lugens asked Werner what exactly he needed him to do. Hearing that, Werner took out a map and asked Lugens to look at it carefully. Mazel also became surprised after seeing the map and curiously asked what it was. Werner asked both of them not to stare at him like that and said that he would explain everything properly. After understanding the situation, Lugens said that he got what Werner was planning. Werner was going to send out a merchant convoy to gather equipment. To Lugens, it made complete sense because there were many places around those areas that sold very useful items. Werner then explained that Lugens would need to choose suitable adventurers and mercenaries to act as guards for the merchant convoy. Hearing that, Mazel nervously asked what they were going to do about the money. Werner replied that for now the expenses would be covered by the Count family's budget, but eventually the state would pay for it. In truth, Werner had already received approval from his father, and the Crown Prince had also agreed to it without any problems. Mazel was still unsure and hesitantly asked how Werner could be so confident about all of this. Werner calmly replied that Mazel did not need to worry because once they got what they were searching for on the map, they would have all the money they needed. Hearing that, Lugens said that Werner really was a strange person. Mazel quickly told Lugens not to say things like that, but even he admitted that he had never met anyone who knew so much about the continent and its towns. In reality, Mazel had never even seen a proper map before, yet Werner was drawing one completely on his own. Werner made some excuses about how he learned these things, but deep inside he knew the truth. He had only been able to create the map because he used the fragmented information he remembered while playing the game. He pointed out towns that either had famous shops or important events connected to the game's story. While Mazel and Lugens continued praising Werner and calling him almost like a scholar, Werner quietly kept thinking about his plans. While drawing the map, he realized that many towns had never even been mentioned in the game. In fact, the story barely introduced feudal lords, nobles, or authority figures from those areas, so it was very difficult for him to fill in all the missing details himself. Suddenly, Werner remembered something else and started explaining that if they traveled south until they reached a river and then moved east, they would eventually find a forest on their left side. If they entered that forest, they would discover an old sign near a place where monsters appeared endlessly. So Werner suggested that Mazel and Lugens should go there and test their strength against them. Hearing that, Lugens became completely shocked and asked what kind of brain a noble like Werner even had. Werner quickly made an excuse, saying that he simply had an interest in monsters and ecology. But that explanation only made Lugens think Werner was even stranger than before. Lugens still did not fully agree with the idea, but Mazel decided that both he and Lugens would go there and train together anyway. After that, Werner started thinking about the abandoned Fort Werisa. According to the original story, it was supposed to become an important place very soon. Once the restoration work began, the fort would become crowded with soldiers and workers. Because of that, Werner believed they only had until the renovations were completed to prepare themselves properly. Finally, all three of them left the bar after greeting each other. While walking away, Werner thought that no matter how much he prepared, in the end, he still had no choice but to leave everything in Mazel's hands and trust his party. Until then, all Werner could do was help Mazel grow stronger however he could. Soon they separated ways as Mazel headed toward his house while Werner remained lost in his own thoughts. The scene then shifted to the royal castle in the capital, where the king and Prince Hubertus were talking together. The king asked about the condition of Fort Werisa. Hubertus replied that everything was going smoothly, and once Marquis Kneipp arrived, they would begin the restoration work seriously. They also discussed the revival of the Demon Lord, along with how the reorganization of the knights was progressing and how the kingdom's military strength was steadily improving. But in the end, the king asked about Viscount Werner. Prince Hubertus replied that Werner claimed he had no intentions other than maintaining his friendship with Mazel. The king then asked whether Hubertus could truly confirm that. Hubertus answered with a yes, saying that Werner did not seem to have any hidden motives. Moreover, some men had secretly been assigned to observe Werner, and all the reports about him had been completely normal. Hearing that, the king decided that they should trust Werner for the time being. After that, he asked about the hero. Hubertus explained that many nobles were trying very hard to get close to Mazel, but thankfully they had managed to handle the situation without major problems. Moreover, Viscount Werner had been acting as a great support for them at the academy. The king then said that if Werner truly had no intention of taking the hero into his own household, then he would make a suitable middleman between the royal family and Mazel. Hubertus agreed with that idea as well. Noticing Hubertus looking strangely pleased, the king asked why he seemed so happy about the matter. Hubertus replied that Werner was only slightly older than his own son. Even though Werner was not very ambitious, he still possessed the ability to lead others properly. Because of that, Hubertus had no complaints about Werner's family background or lineage. Hearing all of that, the king also agreed and said that this was the perfect opportunity to continue observing Werner and see whether he could become useful to the kingdom in the future. He then mentioned that there would soon be another audience with the hero, and it would also serve as a good chance to see what kind of ideas Werner would bring to them next. In this world, there were many kinds of celebrations and customs, but one thing was common among everyone. Even superstitious traditions like holding weddings on lucky days were followed by all. Werner had heard that since the days of the week were named after gods, this world might follow a belief system with many gods and goddesses. But as it turned out, this world actually followed belief in only one god. Today was Werner's birthday, and it also happened to be a holiday. But Werner did not get to enjoy the holiday because he was standing in front of Prince Hubertus. Werner presented his idea and explained that they should only add those weapons into the knight's arsenal after personally inspecting the items first. Hearing that, Prince Hubertus said that it sounded fine and that he hoped the idea would work well. The prince also praised Werner for bringing such an idea to him beforehand, but he still asked whether Werner truly believed they could obtain weapons of such high quality. Werner replied with a yes and explained that it would be best if they could obtain them from within their own kingdom, but almost everything valuable had already been taken from the ruins inside their lands. Deep down, Werner remembered how things worked in the game. While playing, he had naturally followed the flow of the story, beginning in the royal capital. Most of the equipment found there had only been low-level gear, but once the story moved outside the kingdom, expensive items, ingredients, fabrics, and powerful equipment suddenly became much more common. Moreover, Lugens himself had mentioned that good equipment could still be found within this country. So Werner started wondering why the border towns had equipment with much better performance and prices. Prince Hubertus agreed with Werner and said that even after checking the records carefully, it seemed that most high-quality weapons had already been sold off. Werner understood that high-level equipment mostly came from ancient ruins, especially from the remains of the destroyed ancient kingdom. Although some equipment came from dungeons and similar places, there were also many other valuable items found in the same way. For example, rare items were often discovered among the furniture and belongings inside old tombs. Because of that, towns and villages that traded in excavated items had appeared around the ruined lands very quickly. Armor was usually sold to blacksmiths and goldsmiths, while other items were handled by second-hand merchants. But Werner still did not know the exact numbers behind those trades. Perhaps no one had ever paid much attention to these matters before. Still, Werner could not understand why powerful gear and magical items were constantly being sold to foreign countries. He shared all of these thoughts while wondering what the real reason behind it all was. Lastly, Werner said that he would continue investigating the matter and send detailed reports later. Prince Hubertus agreed and told Werner to proceed with it. The prince understood that Werner was trying to create a warning system in case demons attacked. He also said that he would relay all this information to Marquis Kneipp. Since Fort Warissa was not very far from the capital, there was always a chance of an attack. Because of that, being able to receive warnings quickly, even during the night, would be a huge advantage for them. The prince then asked whether Werner had anything else to report. Werner replied with a no and said that this was all he currently knew. After that, Werner took his leave. Once Werner left, Prince Hubertus asked his personal secretary what he thought about the matter. The secretary replied that Werner used resources very efficiently with very little waste, but everything would still depend on the final results. He also said that it was unfortunate that Werner was only the son of a count. Prince Hubertus then said that the fact that excavated items were being carried outside the kingdom's borders was already becoming a serious problem. Because of that, it would be better for them to act quickly. They should prepare countermeasures for any new dangers discovered within their territory and continue their investigation carefully. The secretary agreed with the prince's decision. The scene then shifted to some time later at the trading company, where Werner was welcomed by one of the workers. Werner was fully surprised that the man recognized him even before he introduced himself. The worker even knew about his new title, which made Werner realize once again just how informed a large trading company like Bierstedt Trading Company really was. The man politely asked Werner to wait for a while because Bierstedt would arrive shortly. Werner then sat down on the sofa and quietly waited for Bierstedt to come. During that time, he started thinking about the past and how he had previously received help in gathering all the fragrant oils. The owner of the company must have earned a huge profit from that deal. Because of that, Werner knew he had to stay careful. If he let his guard down even once, people around him could easily take advantage of the situation. At that moment, Werner also found himself thinking about Prince Hubertus. Soon after, Bierstedt finally arrived and greeted Werner while introducing himself properly. He also apologized for making him wait. The two exchanged polite greetings for a while, and Werner thanked Bierstedt for his kind words and praise. After that, Werner explained that he had come to request the formation and procurement of a merchant convoy. He also mentioned that he planned to hire guards for the convoy as well. Hearing that, Bierstedt immediately started staring at Werner carefully. Still, Werner understood that reaction completely. He could not blame Bierstedt for being suspicious. Even though Werner was now a viscount, this was still not the kind of business proposal a normal student would suddenly bring forward. Werner then handed over a list of towns along with the items he planned to purchase. He also requested confirmation of the inventory available in each town. Bierstedt carefully looked through the list and became surprised because the information was both rare and highly accurate. Werner knew very well that the ideas and details written on the list were already making Bierstedt think about starting a completely new business venture around them. Werner then explained that after the recent demon stampede, there was no guarantee that future attacks would not become even more dangerous. Deep down, Werner was sure that Bierstedt must have already heard rumors about the Demon Lord's revival through the merchants who frequently traveled near the royal palace. Because of that, Werner explained that due to the growing danger of demons and future uncertainties, he wanted to gather equipment for himself and his allies in advance. And among all the companies, the only one he believed he could trust with such a task was Bierstedt Trading Company. Bierstedt agreed with Werner's proposal, but he also clearly stated that the prices would naturally rise according to the difficulty and risk involved. Werner said that he understood those conditions very clearly. So, for the beginning, he wanted Bierstedt to deliver 8 weapons and 8 sets of armor. Of course, Bierstedt would be compensated properly for all of it. Actually, Werner wanted to equip the palace soldiers with better equipment, but the kingdom's financial condition made that impossible right now. Still, at the very least, Werner wanted the higher officials to learn that high-level equipment actually existed. Then, at a later time, they could use the royal treasury to gather more of those items. Bierstedt then asked what would happen if large quantities of such equipment were discovered later. Werner replied that he had no objection to Bierstedt selling those items to others after Werner received what he personally needed. So Bierstedt was free to buy and sell any additional goods he obtained during the journey. Normally, most nobles would try to monopolize such business opportunities and increase their own profits. But Werner did not think that way because, in the current situation, there was no real benefit in acting greedily. Werner also mentioned that he would prepare a map and that he had already received permission from Crown Prince Hubertus to cross the borders if necessary. Hearing that, Bierstedt asked whether he could receive a copy of the map as well while carefully staring at Werner. Werner understood very well how valuable the map truly was, but at the same time, allowing Bierstedt to fully possess such information could become dangerous later. So Werner explained that one of his own people would guide Bierstedt to the villages and locations personally. After all, Werner believed that someone as skilled as Bierstedt would not need to be shown the route a second time. Bierstedt agreed with that arrangement and then asked whether Werner was truly certain that equipment matching his standards actually existed in those places. Deep down, Werner knew he had no real proof. Everything was only based on his memories, guesses, and assumptions from the game. Because of that, Werner honestly told Bierstedt that even if the designated goods could not be found, he would still cover all travel expenses. And so Bierstedt did not need to worry about losses. Bierstedt appreciated Werner's honesty and thoughtful approach. After leaving the trading company, Werner started thinking about the future once again. Once the invasion of the demon army truly began, traveling safely between regions would become far more difficult. And when that happened, not only would obtaining those items become impossible, but investigating the truth behind everything would also become much harder. Werner knew that every country would eventually come up with its own countermeasures regarding equipment and magical items. Just like the demons themselves, the number of such items was still unknown, so his own kingdom was already falling behind in many ways. The same problem also applied to Fort Werisa. No matter what happened, Werner knew he had to decide his priorities carefully. Because of that, Werner decided to visit the Adventurers Guild next. While walking there, he started wondering what would happen if people became greedy over these discoveries. Human greed alone could create problems just as dangerous as the demons themselves. The scene then shifted to the Adventurers Guild, where Werner was welcomed by one of the receptionists and asked how they could help him. Werner replied that he wanted to hire some people. Hearing that, the receptionist politely asked him to follow her because she would take him directly to the guild master. As Werner walked through the guild, he briefly wondered how the receptionist managed to handle so many rough and rowdy adventurers every day. But soon, he shook away the thought, feeling that it was strange for him to think about something like that in the middle of such an important matter. After reaching the room, the guild master welcomed Werner warmly. Hearing the greeting, Werner became a little surprised that he had apparently become famous already. Werner then explained that he had a request involving an investigation. He needed scouts to examine the frequency of monster appearances and also provide security in several specified locations. He further explained that he needed a total of 20 skilled scouts. Hearing that number, the guildmaster looked surprised because it was far more than a normal request. Werner calmly explained that he already had a list of investigation priorities prepared and the assignments would be distributed according to each scout's preferences and abilities. The guildmaster then asked whether the scouts would still have the right to refuse after hearing the full details of the mission. Werner agreed immediately and also added that hazard pay would be provided whenever necessary. He further explained that the rewards would increase depending on the danger and difficulty of the investigation. Adding proper incentives would encourage people to take the missions more seriously. Hearing all that, the guildmaster became much more interested and directly asked Werner about the exact locations that needed investigation. After that, Werner and the guildmaster spent a long time discussing the details of the requests, routes, horse arrangements, and the safest ways to carry out the missions. Now that those preparations were finally complete, Werner felt slightly relieved. Once the scouts returned, they would most likely share everything they learned about monster appearance rates with the guild itself. And with more accurate information available, Werner hoped future casualties could be reduced significantly. The scene then shifted toward the Mercenaries Guild, where a young receptionist asked how he could help Werner. Werner replied that he wanted to hire guards for a merchant convoy. Actually, the Adventurers Guild and the Mercenaries Guild were located inside the same building. Because of that, it was sometimes difficult to clearly tell the difference between the two professions. Adventurers mainly explored dungeons and usually worked in small groups. Mercenaries, on the other hand, were generally hired for situations where battle was expected, whether against monsters or even humans. Because both professions often received similar requests, having both guilds in the same building was convenient and helped everyone avoid unnecessary traveling. Still, Werner slowly noticed that even though both guilds shared the same building, the atmosphere inside each section felt completely different. The guildmaster looked surprised after hearing about the scale of Werner's project. After examining the situation carefully, he estimated that Werner would need at least 150 guards to properly manage the operation. Werner calmly replied that it was fine because he was already prepared to pay proper compensation. Since most guilds maintained mutual relationships with their members, they also supported the families of mercenaries after death. The maintenance of the guild building, staff salaries, and many other expenses all depended on the profits earned through commissions. Because of that, Werner understood very well that trying to save money in such matters would only create problems later. The guildmaster then asked how Werner wanted the guards to be selected. Werner explained that he had already requested Lugens and Goethe to handle the selection process personally. Hearing those names, the guildmaster became visibly surprised. Meanwhile, Werner started wondering whether that reaction was meant as praise or concern. Deep down, he also wondered if Lugens and Goethe would eventually join the hero's main party in the future. Just as Werner was thinking about the next step of his plans, someone suddenly approached him. The person introduced himself as Felix and asked whether Werner would allow him to join the job being offered. The moment Werner saw him, he became completely surprised. First, he had unexpectedly met Laura, and now he was meeting this person too. The next scene showed the two of them talking together. Actually, the young man was Felix Arnab, the scout who would later become part of the hero's party. His appearance looked more cute than intimidating, making it hard to believe he was actually a skilled scout. Werner admitted that he was impressed Felix recognized him so quickly. Felix laughed and replied that there was probably no adventurer left in the capital who did not know who Werner was anymore. According to him, Werner's hairstyle made him especially easy to recognize. Werner looked confused and asked what Felix meant by that. Felix then pointed toward Werner's ponytail while smiling. Felix asked how long Werner had been growing that ponytail. Werner replied that it had been around 10 years. He had grown used to keeping it, even though it sometimes became really annoying for him. Felix laughed and said that it suited Werner quite well. Werner then asked why Felix suddenly came to a place like this. Werner replied that he was simply buying some necessities from different towns. Felix then started acting very friendly with him, which made Werner wonder whether Felix was naturally this friendly or if he was always the type to get close to people like this. So Werner directly asked Felix what exactly he was after. Felix replied that he was just looking for something interesting. Hearing that, Werner became happy that Felix had shown interest. Deep down, Werner knew that Felix was an exceptionally talented scout and also a member of the hero's party. Because of that, he could help gather detailed information inside the capital or even accompany the merchant convoy and learn more about the lands and towns. Werner then explained that he wanted Felix to accompany the merchant convoy he mentioned earlier. Since Felix must have already heard about the recent stampede, the chances of another one happening were still very high. Moreover, Felix would get to eat plenty of delicious food from different towns, and he would also receive a proper budget for meals and snacks. Felix thought that it sounded like a very tempting offer and started thinking about it seriously. Meanwhile, Werner thought to himself that he was giving everything he had to prepare behind the scenes. If he could properly support Maisel and his companions, they could make a huge difference in the world. Still, Werner knew that getting someone like Felix interested was not easy. So he told him that there would be a meeting at his house on the next hunting day, and Felix was free to come if he wanted. After saying that, Werner tossed a pouch of money toward Felix. Seeing it, Felix became surprised and asked if it was not a little too much. Werner replied that it was simply a sign of good faith. Moreover, Felix was not forced to accept the request at all. He could even spend the money on food or anything else, and Werner would not complain. Deep down, Werner knew that Felix had grown up in an orphanage and was the kind of person who would easily get along with Maisel and the others. So, to Werner, it felt like a worthwhile investment. After that, Werner stood up and started leaving the place. Felix stared at the pouch of money for a moment before suddenly shouting Werner's name and thanking him for the money. Werner simply waved his hand from behind while continuing to walk away. Deep inside, he felt happy because even though it was a gamble, he had a really good feeling about this matter. In the next scene, a huge commotion had broken out between several people over small matters from their daily lives. They started wondering what everyone would do once the monsters appeared again if people were already acting like this in the current situation. Hearing that, some people started talking about Marquis Knipe and how he was famous for his martial strength. Because of that, they believed everything would be fine. Suddenly, an announcement began echoing through the area about Marquis Knipe arriving there. Hearing it, Werner curiously asked what all this commotion was about. Avant replied that it seemed Marquis Knipe had completed his greetings and was now departing for Fort Warisa. Hearing that, Werner started thinking deeply. Marquis Knipe had arrived in the capital a few days ago, but he had still been busy dealing with the nobles, which was a very troublesome matter, even for someone like him. After that, Werner started thinking again about the changes in the storyline. At first, he believed there would be no renovation of the fortress, but that was not the case at all. So maybe something was still forcing the story to stay on track after all. Still, Werner could not stop wondering whether events would happen exactly like the game's story during another stampede. In the original story, despite multiple search parties being sent out, the demons were somehow discovered only by Maisel's party. So what if the Crown Prince and the others, who were originally supposed to die in the story, ended up meeting their fate somewhere else in the future instead? The thought alone made Werner nervous about the possible consequences. But soon, he calmed himself and thought that maybe it would not happen that way. The royal family was heavily protected by knights now. Moreover, the fact that he himself was alive had already caused many changes in the storyline, so perhaps these modifications would not create too much trouble. Still, there was one thing that continued bothering Werner. Before the stampede, he had no memories at all about His Highness the Crown Prince or even his son. There should have been no way he would forget such important people if he truly remembered this world from the game. So what exactly did that mean? While he still remembered many things before meeting the second princess and the king, he strangely could not remember anything about the first princess. Moreover, could there possibly be some kind of strange power affecting the royal family itself? Werner had also never heard about Marquis Knipe in the original storyline before. So, was there a chance that even his memories were somehow being influenced by the game itself? Soon after, Werner entered a room and introduced himself as Viscount Werner before announcing that the meeting regarding the merchant convoy was about to begin. There were already 6 other people inside the room, and they all started introducing themselves one by one. The first one was Frenson, the assistant butler of Werner's family. The second was none other than the hero himself, Maisel. The third was Lugans. The fourth was Gurka. The fifth was Avant, the manager of Bierstedt Trading Company. And lastly, there was Felix, who had actually shown up just as Werner had hoped. Now that everyone had gathered together, they were finally ready to begin discussing Werner's plan. So Werner is basically throwing the whole game script out the window at this point. But in a world like this, every change comes with a price. He saved the prince and met the princess way earlier than he was supposed to. But does that mean the Demon Lord is going to hit back even harder now? Also, we have to talk about that creepy black stone Maisel found. If it wasn't even in the original game, then who put it there? Is the game itself evolving, or is someone else pulling the strings from the shadows? What do you guys think that stone actually is? Since now Werner finally has his team ready, then why he's still pretty stressed out. It's kind of funny as the hero's just out there having a good time while the side character's doing all the hard work to save the world. But now that the story is changing, will Werner actually survive the next big battle? Or is he just making things worse? I'm curious that if you woke up in a game as a character that was supposed to die, would you stay and try to fix things like Werner, or would you just run away and hide? Tell me in the comments. And before you go, please drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it. It really helps me out. Also, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next part. Thanks for watching.